Hello, I am Lauren, and today I want to go through the slide deck that I made and build a basic child theme from the 2025 WordPress theme. First slide, full site editing and theme.json, creating a child theme optimized for performance and scalability. For front-end developers who relied on writing cascading style sheets, the shift to block development can feel disorienting. It seems like WordPress is forcing us away from CSS files and into a massive JSON object. When we look at it from a systems architecture perspective, theme.json isn't replacing CSS. It is acting as a centralized design token API that feeds both the front-end browser and the back-end Gutenberg editor interface. As I was reading through some of the information for this, I started to wonder, what does this have to do with development becoming somewhat dependent on AI as we progress? So I did a little search. Is it easier for AI agents to review a website that relies on JSON for theming rather than CSS? The answer, yes, it is generally much easier for AI agents to review, parse, and even modify a website that relies on JSON for theming rather than CSS. Not recently, but maybe like a year ago, I actually tried to use AI to help me with a style sheet, and I realized it was terrible at CSS. And then I remembered most developers are not that great at CSS. I put this up here because this is the dead giveaway. If you see CSS that's got a lot of important rules in it, you know that developer they're not really that great with CSS. When we think of web scalability in 2026, we have to design for machine readability. Standard cascading style sheets are built for human visual rendering engines. They're messy, full of cascading specificity overrides, hard for an LLM to reliably manipulate without breaking layout regressions elsewhere. By treating our theme as a JSON data layer, we are structuring our front-end architecture to be instantly parsed, understood, and safely modified by AI agents. We're essentially future-proofing our site's theme framework for programmatic automation. Got a little visual here. The theme JSON is the data layer. To simplify this to its most basic concepts, the front-end browser and the block inspector. On the front-end side, it compiles your data tokens into native global CSS custom properties, variables, and semantic utility classes. And on the block inspector side, it uses the data to dynamically construct, enable, or disable UI controls for the user in the admin sidebar. What is a dynamic CSS variable? If Sass variables are like a static configuration file, CSS custom properties variables are like a live database for your layout. The core concept, the what. A CS variable, technically called a custom property, is a way to store a specific value like a hex code or a font size inside a name that the browser understands natively. We've got the syntax here, how to use it. Number 2, why dynamic versus static? The Sass comparison. Sass variables. These are preprocessor variables. They are compiled into raw CSS before the file is sent to the browser. Once the site is live, the variable is gone. It's just a hard-coded hex code. You can't change a Sass variable in the browser. CSS variables. These are runtime variables. They live in the browser's memory while the page is open. If you change the value of a variable using a script or a setting, every element using that variable updates instantly without a page refresh. The theme JSON connection. This is the data layer in action, the process. You write color F5F2E8 in your JSON. The result, WordPress automatically registers that as a CSS variable. The scalability, because it's a variable, WordPress can scope your styles to specific sections. For example, your header can have one set of variables and your footer can have another, even if they share the same block types. Years ago, when Sass introduced variables to the front end, it felt like the back end was finally staging a takeover. We were suddenly using programming concepts, variables, nesting, and logic to write styles. But Sass was just the rehearsal. Native CSS variables are the actual performance. By using them via theme.json, we aren't just styling a page, we're creating a live API of our design system. We define the alabaster token once, and then the browser maintains a dynamic reference to it everywhere. This is the difference between hard coding a result and architecting a system. One more lengthy slide here. I wanted to talk a little bit about Adobe Experience Manager versus WordPress because they're somewhat in competition. Well, WordPress VIP versus Adobe Experience Manager. There are pros and cons for both, but today I thought it was worth it to kind of compare and contrast in terms of how they deal with CSS. In the enterprise world, Adobe Experience Manager relies on a mechanism called client-side libraries, Clientlibs, and the AEM style system to manage front ends. Here is how the workflows contrast. Adobe Experience Manager, the imperative build step. AEM requires developers to set up heavy full-stack front-end build tooling, typically Webpack, NPM, and compiler watchers. The workflow. You write standard, deeply nested Sass SCSS variables, like editing color background inside variables.scss file. The compilation. The build pipeline compiles, compresses, and minifies those preprocessor files into static monolithic bundles called Clientlibs. The vulnerability. Because it's compiled ahead of time, changing a single brand color means running a code pipeline to rebuild and redeploy the static style sheet bundle across the server tier. The editor UI has no native concept of what that Sass variable actually means without human-written CSS classes mapping back to it. Now, WordPress 7.0, the native Runtime API. WordPress skips the pre-processing compile step entirely for core configuration. The workflow. You write a semantic key value pair in a raw data file, theme.json. The compilation. There is none. The WordPress core rendering engine negotiates the variables directly at runtime. It splits the values into dynamic CSS custom properties inside the browser, while simultaneously feeding those exact same configuration options to the backend Java React script block inspector.
Fact check, there's no Java involved in the non-existent WordPress compilation. This should say PHP. I double checked here to make sure I wasn't imagining things. How accurate is the statement? The WordPress core rendering engine negotiates the variables directly at runtime. It splits the value into dynamic CSS custom properties inside the browser while simultaneously feeding those exact same configuration options to the backend Java React script block inspector. There's no Java involved in that, so we get our extended reasoning. The statement is a mix of incorrect technical terminology and a misunderstanding of how WordPress actually works. No Java backend. Java is used in AEM. No Java backend. WordPress is built on PHP and MySQL. It does not use Java on the backend. React is front end. React runs entirely in the user's browser, not as a backend engine. In WordPress, it powers the block editor, Gutenberg UI. That is this part right here. So the React part would be so that if you made a change in the inspector UI, you would immediately see that change reflected in the editor. No runtime negotiation. WordPress does not dynamically negotiate variables inside the browser at runtime to split them into CSS. How WordPress actually handles this. The statement is likely a confused description of global styles. Here's how that process actually works. The backend, WordPress reads configuration options from a theme.json file using PHP. CSS generation. PHP processes these options on the server and generates standard HTML and CSS custom properties, variables. It then sends the finished static code to the browser, the editor, React. The same theme.json data is passed to the React-based Gutenberg editor. This allows the sidebar inspector tools to match your theme's color palettes, spacing, and fonts. And I will say right here, you don't even actually need React to create a Gutenberg block. You can do this purely with PHP and JavaScript. Can you summarize how AEM uses Java? AEM is an enterprise content management system built entirely on an enterprise Java stack. Instead of a traditional database, AEM runs on a hierarchical content repository and relies on Java to handle content rendering, business logic, and component development. You could read more about this if you wanted to, but I just wanted to quickly interject to say that that piece is quite wrong, and I wanted to correct myself. So I'm probably going to correct this slide. This right here should say PHP. Yeah, there we go. That's accurate.
And just to summarize, if you look at how massive enterprise content management systems like AEM handle site presentation, they're still fundamentally trapped in a legacy compilation loop. They rely on Clientlibs bundling Sass and SCSS files down into static style sheets via an external asset pipeline. If you change a global brand token, you have to run a code build to push out a new monolithic style sheet. WordPress has completely leaped over this limitation. By treating theme.json as a live data layer, WordPress handles configuration natively at runtime. We aren't compiling text files into bigger text files. We're passing a single structured array to an engine that instantly negotiates browser presentation and admin UI tools at the same exact time. It's lighter, it's faster, and it completely eliminates the technical debt of commercial framework build steps. All right, so for this video, I wanted to use a real world project. It's a site. I bought the domain for it. I have not done any work except for some basic strategy, some basic strategy, and prompted a layout in Stitch. So that's a screenshot of what I have in Stitch right now. So I thought this would be a pretty good project to use for showing how to build a child theme. So I have this all broken down into steps. I'm just gonna run through these real quick, and then we'll actually do this on the new site, on the staging version. So all these steps came from a blog post that I wrote called How to Create a WordPress Block Child Theme with theme.json Boilerplate. I'll put this in the description. You can copy it, bookmark it, paste it into your own blog. There's some intro story on what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. The steps are very easy. We basically have 3 steps. We have 3 files. I mean, you can break them down into substeps, but there are 3 main things that we're trying to do here. Create the child theme. That means we're going to piggyback on a parent theme that's already established, and the 2025 is, in my opinion, the best option. It's the most recent WordPress theme. We don't have a 2026. It's my understanding that the focus would be on pushing towards WordPress 7.0 Armstrong and kind of putting the theme on the back burner until that was optimized. So we need a style CSS. We need a functions PHP. Those are basic. Even if you were doing a child theme 15 years ago, I'm pretty sure those are the 2 main files you would need. And we are going to add the theme.json boilerplate. This one is kind of long, so I just did little screenshots for my slide deck. There are some notes in here, but yeah, it's a pretty concise little post about how to do this. And the reason I made it is because I don't do this very often. It's not every day that I'm building a child theme, so I just wanted something I could quickly reference. So feel free to take this and like I said, bookmark, copy, paste it, make your own blog, whatever you wish, just to make things easier. So these were the steps: create the child theme folder, create the required files. We just went over that a little bit. Style CSS to declare the child theme metadata. Functions PHP to properly enqueue the parent styles if needed, or add custom logic. So if you needed to write some action or some filter or some custom function for the theme, like maybe you don't need a plugin or you don't need to go that route, you can just cram your logic into functions PHP. This is kind of the baby step before you get to needing a full-fledged plugin. I would say for style CSS, for me right now at my level of knowledge, I would probably rely on this for anything that's not obvious and intuitive for the theme.json. First thing that comes to mind is animations, but there's probably some answer for that in theme.json.
Me again. I wanted to get the answer about what theme.json can and cannot do. I did a quick little search. Can theme.json be used for CSS animations? The short answer is no. Theme.json cannot natively declare or manage CSS keyframe animations. If you want a button to pulse, a landing page element to fade in, or a registration card to slide up, style.css is your mandatory fallback. And then I wanted to know what else. Like, what else are we going to need style CSS for? And I got a few examples. Complex state selectors like focus within, has, int_child. While theme.json has matured to natively handle basic pseudo-states like hover, focus, and active on structural elements, it cannot process complex combinators or functional pseudo-classes. Another one is advanced CSS grid frameworks. WordPress 7.0 features a highly capable native grid layout block engine. However, theme.json is fundamentally built to configure flat values, not dynamic structural formulas. And we also have dynamic browser calculations. The calc hard calculations that bridge viewport sizes with static developer pixels belong inside style CSS. And also complex style overrides for third-party plugins when building platforms that rely on external database assets like Fluent Forms. Those styling style sheets those styling style sheets are injected downstream from your core theme files. And I got this note: as a systems architect, your job isn't to force a single tool to do everything. It's to understand where the parameters of your data layer and where your raw browser execution begins. Use theme.json to define what your site is, your design tokens, your palette boundaries, and your core typography definitions. But the moment your architecture requires procedural, conditional styling, advanced relational rules like has or explicit enterprise grid areas, that's your cue to gracefully step into style.css. That's not breaking the block workflow, that's pairing configuration with targeted code architecture.
Third file to handle all design configurations, theme.json, colors, typography. If you want to use the no-code site editor UI to handle colors and fonts out of convenience, your child themes theme.json can simply be a blank object. This registers your child theme to the 7.0 block engine while letting you customize style coordinates visually in the admin panels later. Link to that post, oneoffboss.com, how to create a WordPress block child theme. Then this just breaks down what we need for each one. So for the style CSS, there are some things, well, for this whole process, there are some naming bits that are mandatory and then some you can change. One that we definitely need to have is the template. We absolutely have to reference the parent theme that we're going to use. the text domain needs to match the name of your folder. So let's say you don't want to call your theme 2025 child. Let's say it's ABC theme, whatever. So this would need to be ABC theme, and the folder would need to be ABC theme. And then everything else is open for interpretation. Be creative. This was what we were talking about with enqueuing the style sheet in case you don't want to use the theme.json to handle the style rules. Then you could always do both. It's not one or the other. But you would need to enqueue your CSS, your custom CSS for your theme. Here you would want to use this. I'm gonna have to edit this part. So this is the handle. This is like the link tag handle 2025 child style. You could probably name this whatever you want, but just for consistency, try to tie it back into what you've already got going on. Similar down here, 2025 child enqueue styles. That pretty much covers functions.php. This is the part that I break down into screenshots because I couldn't just paste it in. There was far too much, but I broke this down into 3 sections. So this is the actual boilerplate file, the JSON file for theme.json. This boilerplate focuses entirely on global settings. It defines your custom color palette, font families, and fluid font sizes. When you define these elements under settings, WordPress automatically generates the corresponding CSS custom properties, variables, and classes behind the scenes, making them available in the site editor. Create a file named theme.json. This is non-negotiable, and paste the following structure. So we have the top line is the schema reference here. Then we have the version. And then the first main section is settings.
I want to make some clarifications here just to be a little more technical. So JSON is describing an object and its properties. So instead of saying sections, really we need to be saying properties. So settings and styles are properties of this theme JSON object. And there aren't 3 sections and there aren't 3 properties. There are 2. Settings and styles. So inside settings, for the purposes of this very simple boilerplate, we're only looking at appearance, tools, color, and typography. And then inside styles, color and typography. So some of what we're defining here is going to be used in styles. So if we look at color and settings, so we've got primary, secondary, base, contrast, and then we can see references here to base and contrast. So we don't see those hex codes here because they are defined here.
Appearance tools, this set to true. This is in relation to the inspector controls. When you have the editor page open and you click on a block, are you allowed to change the appearance? So we have color, custom, true. That means we could change the color and we're not strictly bound to the colors that are provided in the palette. Link, we can change the link color, and then we define the palette: primary, secondary, base, and contrast. Second section here is typography, and then that's broken down into a couple of subsections. So similar to the color, we also have a custom font size set to true. That means that we aren't strictly bound to these sizes. We could do like a 1.25 or 1.75. So also inside of typography, we've got font families and font sizes. So here we've got it broken down into your sans serif and your serif. Font sizes, small, medium, large, extra large. Then we're going to use rims to define those sizes. For beginner purposes, we're just going to focus on font families, font sizes, and go with this very basic sizing structure. And then the final section would be styles. So we've got color and typography. Here's where we're referencing some of the values that we've already set. So the base would be here, alabaster background. And then the text, we're going to use the contrast. And that one is here. Base is background, contrast is text, background, text. Primary is like your main CTA. Secondary would be for like subheading text or other minor accents. I have a little chart for that too, which we'll get to. So that pretty much covers this. Here is the chart. This pretty much tells you what these mean. Base, structural canvas, that is the background color. Contrast, structural text, pretty obvious. Primary, interactive dominance, and some main brand color, call to action, buttons, primary links. Secondary, accentuation, subtitles, meta text, borders, secondary badges, or buttons. Then we have tertiary accent, subtle variation, hover highlights, code blocks, or alert notifications. This comes from Rich Tabor. If you look at this, this is not correct. Like, these are the colors that I want to use on the site, but their names are wrong. So that's why I put these two together. So when I look at this, I know this is the text color. I know this is the background color. So this is not actually primary. This is contrast. And this is not actually neutral. This is the base. This would be primary. This would be the main brand color. It's what I would want to use for the buttons. And this would probably be secondary. And then I would say tertiary accent would probably be like somewhere in here, maybe on the darker side. If you get too light with this color, white text on this teal green color can cause some accessibility issues. So we made it through the slide deck, and now we can go see if this thing is still working. You don't have permission. I actually do. If you in Hostinger, if you leave your file manager open for too long, get distracted and come back, it'll lock you out, which I've learned recently. I'm new to Hostinger, so there may be a little bit of fumbling. I have a staging site that I set up 35 minutes ago just for this, and I do have the WordPress dashboard open, but the initial work that we're going to do is going to be in the file manager. Now, if you were developing locally, this process would be a little bit different depending on how you have your local environment set up. I do have a parent theme that I'm working on with Tailwind that absolutely requires me to develop it locally, because if you're using Tailwind, it's like a package and you gotta build. So you do that locally, package up your theme, and then you can upload your theme into your live WordPress admin. But that is for possibly another video. So we can look at this. We're in my staging site. Themes are kept under content. Here we go. And we know that we want to make a new theme here. So we're going to create a new folder. And this is simply named Witness Near Me WNM theme. Create. Now we know we got to make 3 files in here. So we'll go back up here. First one is style.css. So we're going to just copy this. Go into our theme. It's lonely in here. Here's a file. Style CSS. Paste this. We do not want it to be named 2025 child. We're just going to call it WNM theme. We're going to use oneoffboss.com. I should probably use syntax biz. No, that's not up yet. A block child theme featuring a custom. Yeah, that's fine. That is my name. This part must stay the same, 2025, because that's the parent that we're going to reference. This part, text domain, must match the name of our folder. WNM theme. All right, she's ready. Save this. Close it. We need to make 2 more files in here. So the next one we're going to make is functions.php. We'll do this the easy way. Oh, I spelled it wrong. I put 2 N's in it. Okay, let's get out of here. Delete. Create. Paste. Child theme functions and definitions. That is fine with me. Here we're going to get rid of this. And we're just going to call it WNM. Oops. Theme. Enqueueing styles. Similar here. Oops. WNM theme. We'll put a dash in there. Get style sheet URI. Let's change this. 2025 child. WNM theme enqueuing styles. So we have a functions PHP, a style CSS. Now we need one more new file called theme.json. Create. And we will get the boilerplate from here. Okay. I don't think I can copy. Oh, cool. You can copy them. I'm still learning. I don't use Stitch very much. I might use it like once every other month. So primary, we know that that's actually the contrast color. So we're going to look for contrast. I'm going to put this in here. No double hash on that. And let's find the primary color, which is actually named as secondary. Primary color is this. The base is the background. That's this. Here. And secondary that's the base, contrast, primary, secondary. Secondary right here. Hopefully that's the most confusing part about all of this. I think I'm going to leave these as they are. System sans, system serif. And I'm going to leave these as such. I just want to look at these up here and make sure we want to keep this. So for custom link appearance tools, we want to be able to adjust some things if we need to. And that is how you create a child theme with plenty of context and things to reflect on. Now that we have this in here, we should be able to find our theme. So if we go to Appearance, Themes, here it is. I don't have a screenshot for it, but that's okay. So we're going to go ahead and activate the theme. Now we want to see what's this look like. It looks very similar to what was already there, but it does look like maybe some of the font sizing is a little different. From here, I would say the next best thing to do.
I'm going to stop you right there. The next best thing for me to do is stop the video right there. The whole thing ended up being an hour long, and the remainder of the video is pretty much garbage. It's not really helpful. I mean, it just lets you bear witness to just how fumbly I can be. So I'm going to maybe go through the rest of that video, salvage what I can, if there is anything worth holding on to, and just kind of redo some of the steps that I took just to make a couple of little changes in the header. So I'll make a second video doing that because some questions came up while I was working through the rest of it, and I want to get the answers for those before I complete the next section, which is just theme editing with the theme.json and trying to stay away from the style CSS. So thank you for watching. I hope up to this point it was somewhat helpful or educational.